Chapter 1. Saturday Chores. Hey babe, where'd you put the duct tape? The garage was a mess. Old paint cans, broken shelves, half-crushed Christmas decorations, and boxes of who knows what had built up over the years like sediment in a forgotten riverbed. Lorenzo exhaled slowly, resting one hand on his hip, the other wiping sweat from his forehead with the bottom of his faded Eagles t-shirt. Check the top drawer in the laundry room. Matilda called back from inside the house, her voice flat and distracted. Lorenzo frowned, not annoyed, just noting it. That was the third time in a week she'd sounded like she didn't even care who she was talking to. He wasn't needy, never had been. But the little things? They added up. She used to laugh when they worked on house projects together, playfully tease him about his man cave ambitions for the garage. Now she barely made eye contact when she walked past. He stepped inside and rummaged through the laundry drawer. The duct tape was there, of course, neatly placed under a pile of batteries and sewing threads. That was Matilda, organized to the point of obsession. Or at least she used to be. Lorenzo grabbed it and turned to head back out. On the way, he passed their daughter's room. Jennifer's door was cracked open, the glow from her laptop illuminating her face. She was sprawled on the bed in pajama shorts, earbuds in, scrolling. "Hey," Lorenzo said, knocking softly on the doorframe. She pulled out one earbud, only halfway interested. "Yeah. You gonna help out with the garage at all today?" Jennifer gave a lazy shrug. "It's spring break, Dad. I've been studying nonstop all semester. Just 30 minutes. I could use a hand moving that old treadmill." "Maybe later," she muttered, popping the earbud back in. Lorenzo didn't push. He wasn't the kind of dad who forced things. Still, it stung a little. When she was younger, she used to follow him around with a toy hammer, pretending to fix whatever he was fixing. Now, she barely looked up from her screen. He headed back into the garage and got to work. Box by box, pile by pile. Dust choked the air, and cobwebs clung to his arms like static. Still, he found satisfaction in the rhythm of it. Order from chaos. Progress you could see. An hour passed. 2. The sun climbed higher and baked the concrete outside, but the garage stayed just cool enough to keep going. Lorenzo was pushing a rusted shelving unit against the far wall when something caught his eye, a corner of faded fabric sticking out from behind an old broken dresser. He crouched, grunting a little as his knees cracked. He tugged gently. A heavy suitcase, worn leather, scuffed corners. No tag, no lock, just dust and an unfamiliar weight. "What the hell?" he muttered. He wiped it off and dragged it to the center of the garage. Sat on a wooden stool. The zipper protested as he tugged it open. Inside were bundles of postcards, neatly stacked, some rubber banded together. A few looked new. Others had yellowed with age. He reached for the top one. Barcelona in looping cursive. The picture showed a cobblestone street at dusk, lamplight glowing over couples sipping wine. He flipped it over. It was addressed to no one. No stamp. But in handwriting, he recognized immediately Matilda's was a line. "I still dream about this night sometimes." His brow furrowed. He picked up another. "Tokyo." The message on the back was weirder. "He smelled like smoke and rain. I wonder if he ever thinks of me." A strange tightness gripped Lorenzo's chest. He grabbed more cards. Prague, Florence, New Orleans, places she'd never told him she visited. Messages in first person. Personal. Sometimes poetic, sometimes intimate. His fingers were shaking slightly now as he sifted through them. The hotel had a mirror on the ceiling. "I couldn't stop staring at myself after. I told him my name was June. He liked that. I wore the red dress, the one Lorenzo hates." Lorenzo sat back, blinking. The words blurred for a moment, and he rubbed his eyes, convincing himself it was just some kind of project. Matilda had always liked journaling. Maybe this was fiction, a creative writing thing. But why hide it? Why bury it in the garage? He tried to recall their anniversary trips. Vegas, Maine. One year they went to Montreal. Nothing about Spain. Nothing about Japan. He'd never heard her talk about Italy. He stood up, stretching his back. The suitcase stared back at him like a mouth half open, ready to whisper more. A part of him wanted to close it, pretend he never found it. But he couldn't stop now. Under the postcards was a silk scarf, burgundy, with embroidered roses. He held it up. It still carried the faintest smell of perfume, not the brand she usually wore. Underneath that, an old passport. Matilda's maiden name. Several stamps, all matching the postcards. Lorenzo's mouth went dry. "Babe," he called out suddenly, not sure why. From inside, her voice came again, annoyed this time. "What?" But he didn't respond. His brain was fogging up, pieces not clicking into place fast enough. The zipper of the suitcase snapped closed as he fumbled it shut, like slamming the lid on something rotten. He sat back down, staring at the thing like it might open on its own again and start confessing. His mind was racing. When had she even gone to these places? Before they met? During their marriage? She always took conferences for work, didn't she? But that was regional stuff, Denver, Chicago, not goddamn Barcelona. He tried to remember her timelines. How many weekend retreats had she taken where she'd come back relaxed, smiling in that floaty way, like she'd spent the weekend at a spa instead of some HR seminar? Lorenzo rubbed the back of his neck. The garage was quiet now. Too quiet. Not even a bird outside. Just the creak of the rafters and the soft hum of suspicion growing louder in his head. He stood up, turned to put the suitcase on a shelf behind him, but hesitated. No, he kept it with him. Carried it inside, quietly through the side door. In the hallway, he passed Matilda, walking toward the kitchen. She paused, glanced at the suitcase in his hand. For a flicker of a second, he saw it, the slight jolt in her eyes, the half-second of frozen posture. Then she smiled. Too fast. Too wide. "Wow, that old thing?" she asked, voice light. "Yeah, found it behind the dresser in the garage. Didn't even know it was back there." "Oh, that must have been from college or something," she said quickly, brushing past him. "Full of junk, I'm sure." He didn't reply. Just watched her disappear into the kitchen, her shoulders a little too stiff, her hands wringing a dish towel for no reason. He walked past the living room, set the suitcase down in his office, locked the door behind him. He wasn't angry. Not yet. He was confused, but not immediately suspicious. He wondered if they were just from her youth. Chapter 2. The tape. The suitcase sat silently in Lorenzo's office like a closed mouth, keeping darker truths. But he couldn't shake it. The postcards, the perfume, the handwriting, it nagged at him like a sliver under skin. After setting the suitcase down, he made his way back into the garage. He wasn't finished yet. Not even close. The corner where he'd found the suitcase was still half covered in old furniture and tech clutter. There was a milk crate filled with tangled cables, old cordless phones, and one ancient, dust-covered VHS camcorder. He blew over it, and a cloud of fine gray dust puffed into the air. "Damn, haven't seen this thing since." "What 08?" he muttered. He flipped it open. No battery charge left, of course. But tucked beneath in the same crate, he found a small box of VHS tapes, some unlabeled, some marked in faded Sharpie. Christmas 2003, Jennifer's recital, anniversary dinner. And then he saw it. A tape labeled E, Don't Watch. But the name had been roughly scratched over. Black ink slashed through the title like someone had tried to hide it in a hurry. His blood ran cold. His first instinct was to ignore it. Toss it into the trash with the cracked garden tools and tangled extension cords. But something inside him stirred, quiet but forceful, like an itch deep in his bones. He stood in the garage for a full minute, the tape in his hands, just staring. Finally, he carried it into the basement. The basement was half-finished, dim, and a little damp, just like most Midwestern basements. It still had the old tube TV he refused to part with, tucked into the far corner near the storage shelves. He hadn't used the VHS player in years, but it was still hooked up. Lorenzo took a deep breath, slid the tape into the slot, and pressed play. For a moment, the screen was just static, humming in the dim room. Then the picture stabilized, grainy, dated but functional. The first few seconds were ordinary. A party scene, dimly lit, laughter and faint music. The camera tilted, adjusted, like someone fumbling with the buttons. The view centered on a group of people chatting and drinking in what looked like a basement much like his own, only larger. People wore masks, elaborate, almost theatrical. One man wore a gold Venetian mask, another a leather skull. At first, Lorenzo assumed it was a Halloween party. But then he saw her. Matilda, his wife. She walked into the frame slowly, laughing, wearing a tight black dress and heels. Her hair curled and styled, not like her usual neat buns or ponytails. She looked younger, a little more free, but unmistakably her. Lorenzo leaned forward, confusion tightening in his chest. "Matilda," he whispered to the screen. She looked drunk. No, not drunk. Excited. Electric. Her smile was wild, eyes glittering with adrenaline. She moved to a couch in the middle of the room, surrounded by the masked men. The music faded, replaced by muffled breathing. The camera zoomed slightly, and then she dropped the dress. Lorenzo's breath caught in his throat. There was no mistaking it anymore. This wasn't a party. It was something else. Something dark. Sexual. Raw. Matilda knelt. One man approached. Then another. The camera panned as she was gently guided to the floor. Her expression, wide-eyed, lips parted, was not forced, not reluctant. She wanted this. Lorenzo gripped the arm of the couch so hard his knuckles cracked. His stomach twisted. The screen showed movements, flashes of skin, leather, and latex. There were 7 men in total, some standing, some touching, some waiting their turn. And Matilda in the center. Willing, eager. He couldn't look away, couldn't process what his eyes were showing him. His ears picked up the sound of her moaning, breathy and desperate. She said things. Dirty, humiliating things. She whispered names, not his. She begged for more, begged to be used. Lorenzo sat perfectly still, heart hammering. The floor felt like it tilted. The shadows in the basement stretched longer, darker. He kept watching, not because he wanted to, but because it was now undeniable. She wasn't drugged. She wasn't forced. She was performing, participating, enjoying it. Her hands moved with practiced ease. Her body rolled with rhythm. She was completely uninhibited, unrecognizable. He blinked and realized he'd been holding his breath. His throat burned. Sweat prickled his back. "Stop," he whispered to the screen. "Just stop." But the tape didn't stop. It just kept going. A man in a bull mask stepped forward. Another stood over her, gripping her hair. She moaned louder. The sound echoed off the concrete walls of the basement like it was happening all around him. Lorenzo grabbed the remote, paused it. The screen froze on her face, mouth open, eyes wild. The same eyes that used to look at him across the breakfast table. The same lips that kissed him goodnight, that told him he was the only man she'd ever needed. His hand trembled, ball rose in his throat. His knuckles went white as he gripped the remote. Chapter 3. The Confrontation. The remote clattered to the floor as Lorenzo stood, his breath ragged, eyes wild with disbelief. The VHS tape still hummed quietly in the machine behind him, paused on a frozen image that had shattered his world. He took the stairs 2 at a time. Each step was a hammer beat in his chest. Rage didn't surge, it simmered. A cold, controlled fury that made his movements terrifyingly precise. Not a word, not a sound from his mouth as he reached the first floor. The living room was quiet. The only noise came from a laundry room around the corner, shifting fabric, the hum of the dryer. And then her voice, light and casual, cutting through the suffocating silence. "I think I saw the other fitted sheet in Jennifer's room. She always folds them like a damn trash bag," Matilda said, chuckling to herself. Lorenzo turned the corner. She stood by the folding table, a neat stack of towels in her arms. When she looked up and met his eyes, her smile faltered instantly. The stack slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a soft thump. "Lorenzo?" she asked, confused by his expression. His voice came out low and tight, a rope wound too tight to hold forever. "Who are you?" "What?" Her brow creased, trying to read him. He didn't move, just stood there, eyes fixed on her like a man who had walked into his own funeral. "Who are you?" he repeated. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but something in it, an undercurrent of something volcanic, made her step back instinctively. "Lorenzo, you're scaring me. Good." She blinked, backing up another half step toward the dryer. Did something happen? "What's going on?" He took a slow step toward her. "I found a tape." The color drained from her face like water down a drain. Her lips parted, and for a second, nothing came out. Her eyes darted left, right, as if searching for an exit. But there was none. "What tape?" she finally said, voice brittle. "Oh, don't do that," he said, now advancing, fury barely tethered. "Don't insult both of us. You know exactly what tape." "Lorenzo, listen, whatever you think you saw, I saw 7 masked men in a basement," he interrupted. "And I saw you, smiling, moaning, begging." She gasped like he'd slapped her. Her face crumpled. I was young, Lorenzo. That was years ago, before we even— "Don't lie to me," he roared. The walls seemed to shrink around them. The dryer beeped, its cycle done. But no one moved. He pulled the tape out from behind his back and slammed it on the laundry table. "I watched the whole thing. You looked like you'd done it 100 times. And you loved it." Her hands trembled as she covered her mouth, shaking her head violently. "Lorenzo, I didn't know you found that. I thought I burned it. So you try to hide it." His voice dropped again, colder now. "How many more secrets are there, Matilda? I didn't want you to see me like that. I was stupid," she sobbed. "It was before Jennifer. Before we got married." "Liar," he snapped. "The house in that video, it's this house. That carpet, that paint, you were already with me." No, please, Lorenzo, how long?" he asked, cutting her off. "How long did you keep up the act? Please, how long?" She broke, collapsed to the floor in a heap, crying uncontrollably now. "It was just that one time. I swear, just that night. I got caught up. I didn't know how to stop it. I thought if you ever found out, it would destroy everything." "It did," he said coldly. "It just did." Footsteps came down the hallway. Jennifer. She peeked around the corner, wide-eyed, clearly startled by the yelling. "What's going on?" she asked, confused. Matilda looked up, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Jennifer, baby, go back upstairs, please." Lorenzo didn't even turn to look. He just stared at the woman on the floor. "Jennifer," he said, voice steady. "Come here." She hesitated. "Dad, now?" She walked over slowly, arms crossed over her sweatshirt. She looked from Lorenzo to her mother, then to the tape sitting on the table. "What's that?" she asked. Lorenzo finally looked at her. "You knew," he said. Jennifer frowned. "What?" "You knew," he repeated, softer now. Dead calm. "You've known about this for a while, haven't you?" Her mouth opened, closed. "Dad, I don't know what—" "Don't," he said, eyes narrowing. "Don't lie to me. Not right now. I didn't see anything, okay?" she said defensively. I found a box once. A long time ago. Mom told me to put it away and never touch it. So I didn't. I thought maybe it was just something stupid, something before you two got together." "So you knew there was a tape," Lorenzo said. Jennifer froze. Matilda sobbed louder behind them. "And when I asked about weird things like the travel postcards I found earlier, you looked away. You said nothing." Jennifer's voice trembled. "Dad, I didn't want to break the family apart. I didn't want to hurt you." Lorenzo stepped toward her, slowly, pain radiating from every word. "You lied for her. Dad, please, you lied for her," he repeated, more hollow this time. "You have 15 minutes to pack your stuff." Chapter 4. Rain and Silence. The front door creaked open with a groan, barely audible over the pattering of rain that had begun sometime during the chaos. "Out," Lorenzo said, his voice gravel, flat, unrecognizable even to himself. Matilda stood frozen in the hallway, trembling, barefoot, her blouse wrinkled, her hair clinging to her face from tears and sweat. She clutched a jacket. No shoes, no umbrella. Just her. The version of her he never imagined existed. "Lorenzo, please," her voice cracked. "Don't do this. It was a mistake. I made a mistake, okay? But we have a life. You, Jennifer, this home. It was one night. One night with 7 men," he said. He didn't shout. That made it worse. She broke into sobs again, stumbling forward, hands clasped like a child begging God for a miracle. "It didn't mean anything. It was stupid. I was confused. I was young. I didn't know what I was doing." He didn't flinch. "I watched the whole tape, Matilda. You didn't look confused." She crumpled like paper. "I didn't want you to ever see that side of me. It was before I loved you." "You did it in our basement," Lorenzo said, tone hollow. "It wasn't before me. It was before the truth. I lived in a lie. That's the difference." She took a shaky step toward the doorway, still pleading. "Let me explain it better. You don't understand what kind of place I was in then, mentally, emotionally. Please, I didn't love myself. I was lost. Then you should have stayed lost, he replied, and gestured toward the open door. Thunder rolled in the distance. The rain was steady, not violent but relentless, the kind that soaks through to the soul. She looked down at her feet. At least let me get my shoes. Lorenzo didn't move. They'll be waiting for you on the porch tomorrow. With your suitcase. Her shoulders slumped. She looked at him like a stranger. Please, she whispered. Not like this. Not in the rain. I'm still your wife. No, he said. You are my wife. You chose who you are. Dad. Jennifer stepped in, holding a backpack, face red and blotchy. You don't have to. You should have left when I said. Lorenzo growled. Pack. Now. Jennifer's mouth moved, but no words came out. She glanced at her mother, then back at her father, then slowly backed away. I'm sorry. Matilda choked, stepping onto the porch, instantly drenched. I didn't think it would destroy you like this. You didn't think at all, Lorenzo replied, and closed the door in her face. The soft thud echoed like a bullet. He stood still for a moment, hand on the door. The silence on the inside was thick. On the other side of the door, he could hear the rain intensify, and Matilda's faint sobs fading down steps. The sound of her footsteps splashing down the driveway. Then nothing. Lorenzo walked slowly to the living room and collapsed onto the couch, one arm dangling off the side. The remote sat on the floor beside him, untouched. The tape still paused in the basement like a loaded gun no one dared to fire again. He exhaled, long, deep. It didn't feel like relief. It felt like something inside him had died. He stared at the ceiling, the hum of the fridge in the kitchen, the ticking of the old wall clock. Ordinary sounds, absurdly normal in the wake of absolute chaos. He was alone. For the first time in a long time, he was truly alone. Not in the physical sense, but in the spiritual, soul-deep kind of way, the kind where you realize the person you trusted most had been a stranger all along. That the vows you once whispered into a veil meant more to you than to the woman wearing it. A door upstairs creaked. He didn't look. Jennifer's suitcase wheels bumped against the stairs as she slowly descended, her face pale, her steps hesitant. She stood at the bottom step, holding her duffel bag tight against her chest. Dad, she said softly, where am I supposed to go? He looked at her, not cruelly, not coldly. Just tired. So very tired. You're an adult, he replied. Figured out. You didn't figure I needed honesty. So now, I don't owe you shelter. Please, it wasn't like I wanted to lie. She told me not to tell anyone. I didn't know the whole story. I didn't even watch it. That's the point, he cut in. You didn't want to know. Her lip trembled. She turned and left without another word. The door shut again. Silence returned. Lorenzo didn't cry. The tears had come earlier. In the basement, watching frame after frame of betrayal, watching the woman he'd thought was his forever become someone else's puppet, someone willing. What was left in him now wasn't sorrow. It was clarity, a calm that only comes after the wreckage. He leaned back, hands laced behind his head. The clock ticked. The rain pelted against the windows. It was strangely comforting. Nature didn't care what happened inside these walls. He remembered the day he proposed. On the old wooden bridge by Lake Winona. She cried, said yes, jumped into his arms like it was the beginning of something sacred. He remembered working 2 jobs when Jennifer was a baby. Loading trucks at 5 a.m., stocking grocery shelves at night, just to keep the mortgage afloat. So Matilda could stay home. So Jennifer could have stability. He remembered anniversaries, vacations, the handmade Valentine's Day cards he used to sneak into her purse with little notes. Still my favorite chapter. He remembered carrying her upstairs when she broke her ankle on the patio steps, running to get her medicine at 2 a.m., staying up with her when her mother passed. So much given, so much trusted. Flashbacks begin. How their marriage began, what he sacrificed, how he trusted her. Chapter 5. The Fallout. The next morning, the sun rose like it didn't care. It was brighter than it had any right to be. The kind of morning that should have brought coffee on the porch, maybe some jazz playing low in the background while Matilda hummed in the kitchen. Instead, Lorenzo sat at the dining table alone, nursing a black coffee gone cold. The silence wasn't peaceful now. It was loud. His phone buzzed on the table. Matilda, 6 missed calls Jennifer. For new messages, he turned it face down. He hadn't slept. Maybe 2 hours, slumped in the recliner with the remote still in his hand, the tape long since rewound. It haunted him. Every time he blinked, he saw those masked faces again. Her face again. Her mouth. Her eyes. That grin. That moan. He stood up abruptly, as if trying to physically shake the image from his mind. Pacing the living room, he caught himself staring at a family photo on the mantel. One of those fall trips they used to take, all fake smiles and matching flannels. He took it down, stared at it, and placed it face down on the fireplace stone. The doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone. Another knock, more insistent this time. When he opened the door, he was met with a storm of perfume, attitude, and blonde highlights. Matilda's older sister, Rachel. She didn't wait for an invite. She pushed her way in. Jesus, Lorenzo, what the hell is going on? Matilda called me sobbing in the middle of the night, saying you threw her out in the rain. Are you having some kind of midlife crisis? Lorenzo stared at her. Rachel scanned the house like she was gathering evidence. She said you found some old tape or something and just snapped on her. That you humiliated her. That you even kicked Jennifer out. Is that true? Because if so, without a word, Lorenzo turned and walked toward the basement. Rachel huffed. Oh, this is great. I come here trying to talk sense, and you're going to sulk in a back cave? Grow the hell up, follow me, he said, his voice flat. Excuse me? He didn't turn around. Down in the basement, the air was cold and still. Lorenzo reached for the VHS camcorder he'd hooked up the night before and slid the tape back into place. Rachel stood at the bottom of the stairs, arms crossed. Look, whatever's on this thing can't possibly justify treating my sister like he pressed play. It took 20 seconds. 20 seconds before her mouth parted, her arms dropped, and she took a step back. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. The moaning started. The camera panned. Leather. Masks. That laugh, Matilda's laugh. The playful one Lorenzo used to love hearing. Rachel swallowed hard. Turn it off, she whispered. He didn't. I said, turn it off, she shouted, voice cracking. Lorenzo hit pause. Rachel was pale. Her hands trembled as she grabbed the railing. She looked like she'd just seen a ghost. You're telling me that's her? In this house. Her voice barely carried. I'm not telling you anything, Lorenzo said coldly. I showed you. She sank onto the bottom step. Jesus Christ. She ever mentioned anything like this to you? Rachel shook her head, slowly. Not even close. I mean, we joked about wild college nights, sure. But this? 7 guys? In masks? She looked like she was enjoying it. She was, Lorenzo said. She kept that tape hidden for almost 20 years. And she let me build a life on top of it. Rachel didn't speak. She just sat there, stunned. He left her in the basement. Upstairs, Lorenzo grabbed his laptop, logged into his legal insurance portal, found a divorce lawyer with a reputation for being aggressive, booked an emergency consult. Then he picked up his phone, finally, and typed. 2. Brian Keaton, ESQ subject. Urgent divorce filing, adultery evidence provided attached. Time-stamped VHS footage, written statement of events. Then he opened Zillow, started the listing process. The photos were already there from the last refinance, clean, well-lit shots of the kitchen he remodeled himself, the bedroom they used to share, the garage he'd organized before all this exploded. All pieces of a life he no longer recognized. He selected For Sale by Owner, clicked through the prompts. When it asked, Why are you selling?, he typed 2 words. Marriage over. The rest of the day was a blur. Rachel left without saying goodbye. Matilda texted again and again. Her last message read, Please, just talk to me. I love you. I didn't want to hurt you. He deleted it without reading the full paragraph. At work, Lorenzo didn't say much. He showed up Monday morning like always, on time, tools in hand. But his usual rhythm was off. He didn't joke with the crew, didn't comment on the busted coffee machine, just walked to his workstation and started cutting sheet metal like a robot. By lunch, even the younger guys were whispering. Finally, his friend Mark, a wiry ex-Marine who worked beside him in the shop, slid a sandwich across the bench. You look like hell, man. Lorenzo stared at the sandwich, then looked up. You good? Mark asked. Lorenzo paused. Then he nodded slowly. You ever think you knew someone? Like really knew them? Mark scoffed. My ex-wife tried to poison me with diet shakes and kombucha. So yeah, Lorenzo let out a dry laugh, despite himself. Want to talk about it? Lorenzo looked at his friend. Then, for the first time since the basement, he did. He told him everything. The garage, the suitcase, the postcards, the tape, Matilda's eyes, Jennifer's lie, the rain, the fallout, all of it. Mark didn't interrupt. When Lorenzo finished, his voice was hoarse. Mark sat back, silent for a second. Then he leaned forward, put a hand on Lorenzo's shoulder, and said, "Burn her to the fucking ground." Chapter 6. Justice Begins. Tuesday afternoon came with the dull buzz of heat-off metal and the constant rhythm of machinery echoing across the factory floor. Lorenzo was hunched over his workstation, grinding a panel edge smooth, sparks flying near his boots. The repetition helped dull the noise in his head. The hiss of metal, the burn of heat, the pulse of focus. This was his only sanctuary now. Then came the voice. "Lorenzo!" It cut through the air, shrill, familiar, and unwelcome. He turned slowly. Matilda stood by the security gate, clutching her purse like it could protect her from the shame trailing behind her like a storm cloud. Her mascara was already starting to run, hair damp from humidity or tears. He couldn't care less. She looked too out of place among the steel and oil, like a fragile doll in a war zone. "Lorenzo, please," she cried out. "Just talk to me." Every eye on the floor turned. He didn't speak, just raised a hand and pointed. Security didn't hesitate. Two men, one burly and tattooed, the other younger and tight-jawed, stepped forward. "I just want a Lorenzo, please. I just need 5 minutes." "Ma'am," the older guard said firmly, "you're going to have to leave." "I'm his wife." Lorenzo corrected flatly. "Lorenzo, don't do this. Don't humiliate me in front of your coworkers." "You humiliated yourself," he snapped, his voice like a hammer dropping. "You should have thought about that when you bent over for strangers in a basement." Gasps and whispers rose behind him. A few guys whistled low. One let out a muttered "damn." Her face went pale, then red. She tried to argue, but the guards flanked her. "Don't touch me," she screamed, voice cracking. "Lorenzo, please. You're not even letting me explain. You had your chance. In your turn," he said, turning his back as they escorted her out. He didn't look back once. That night, Lorenzo sat on the couch with a glass of whiskey and his laptop open. The tape had already been digitized onto a USB earlier that week. He'd watched it once more, not out of masochism, but out of clarity, out of necessity. There were faces, not all clear, some in shadows, but 2, maybe 3, he recognized from years ago. One stood out. Paul Jennings. They used to work together at the old steel yard before the merger. Paul had transferred. Lorenzo remembered the guy being cocky, always telling crude jokes in the break room about the freaks out there. Apparently, he was one of them. Another was Derek Walsh, a local gym rat, married, 3 kids. Lorenzo had seen them trick-or-treating last Halloween. One of those kids had called him Uncle Ree. He plugged in the USB and opened a directory labeled Wolves. Each clip had been time-stamped, some even labeled. His hands moved with purpose, dragging files into folders, clipping faces, sharpening contrast when necessary. It wasn't rage anymore, it was precision. Focus. Justice. He bought a dozen blank USB drives at the 24-hour pharmacy. One by one, he burned copies. He printed photos where needed. With a calm, methodical rhythm, he slid them into padded envelopes. He addressed the first one to Mrs. Emily Walsh, 32 Maple Row, Franklin, Indiana. He added a sticky note. "Watch this alone. Your husband is wearing the wolf mask." The second went to HR Department, Central Fabrication Division, attention. Ethics Review Board, another 2. Jacob Milner, a guy Lorenzo hadn't spoken to in 5 years, but who used to brag about wild parties with Matilda's college girls. And another, Officer Greg Huxley, Franklin County Police Department, Internal Affairs Division. Huxley was the third face, still wearing his badge on the inside of that party. Lorenzo knew Internal Affairs would tear that place apart if they got a whiff of this. He didn't add names on some. He didn't need to. The content would speak for itself. Later that week, Jennifer called. She didn't start with hello. "Why are you doing this?" she snapped, clearly crying. Lorenzo took a breath. Where are you? At Leah's. Her mom said I could stay a few weeks. He paused. I'll cover your tuition, your phone, the apartment, if you want to stay on campus this fall. But I can't come home. Not yet, he said, voice like stone. Not until I can look you in the eye without wondering if you're lying again. I'm not. Don't, he cut in. Not now. You knew Jennifer. You covered for her. Lied to my face. She was silent. I'll keep supporting you. But understand this, loyalty isn't about blood. It's about truth. And you broke that. Jennifer sniffled quietly. I didn't know it was that bad. That tape? That's the tip of the iceberg. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know, he said. But I'm not the one you should be saying that to. You're one of the reasons she thought she could get away with it. The line went dead a few seconds later. By Friday, the storm had begun. Paul Jennings was called into HR for conduct review. He didn't come back to work after lunch. Derek Walsh's Facebook page exploded. Friends unfollowing. His wife posted a cryptic message. To the man I married, hope the wolves were worth it. I'm taking the kids and going to my brother's. Later that night, Lorenzo got a text from an unknown number. You smug bastard. You ruined my life. Hope it was worth it. DW. He didn't reply, but it was absolutely worth it. The best message came Sunday afternoon from Mark. It was just one sentence. Heard Huxley got his ass beat in a bar bathroom by his wife's brother. Guess he didn't like the mask. Lorenzo cracked a smile for the first time in days. One man got fired. Another beaten by his wife's brother. A storm of chaos. Chapter 7. Reclamation. Lorenzo stood in front of the mirror in the gym locker room, wiping sweat from his brow with a towel. His reflection stared back at him. Not the man he was months ago, but not yet the man he wanted to be either. He was leaner now, face more defined, eyes less haunted. His shoulders, once slouched under the weight of betrayal, had begun to square again. It had been 6 weeks since the storm broke. 6 weeks since he'd watched his life shatter in pixelated VHS grain and leather masks. 6 weeks since he'd turned revenge into a quiet, methodical purge. And now, the ashes were settling. He pulled a clean shirt over his head and stepped out of the gym into the crisp morning air. The sky was a gentle gray, sun trying to break through. He liked that. Not too bright, not too dark. A liminal space, just like him. His therapist's office smelled like peppermint and lavender, a calming scent that always reminded him of the little satchels Matilda used to hang in the closet. Except now that scent no longer stung, it was neutral again. So, said Dr. Harper, legs crossed, her glasses perched low on her nose, how's the anger today? Lorenzo chuckled softly, leaning back on the couch. Measured, controlled, tired. That's improvement, she said. You're not suppressing. You're channeling. That's healthy. He nodded. I still have moments. I'll be folding laundry, and it hits me I married a stranger. I gave her my soul, and she lit it on fire for a thrill. Dr. Harper didn't flinch. She never did. And yet, here you are, breathing, lifting, living. Barely, he said, more honestly than he intended. But yeah, living. She tilted her head. What was the last thing you did for you, Lorenzo? Something selfish. Something small. No one else in mind. He blinked. I bought a fishing rod. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Did you go fishing? Not yet, he admitted. But Mark's been bugging me too. Says the water's full of bass this time of year. Then I suggest you go. Take the silence. The stillness. Let's speak to you. He nodded slowly, the image of a quiet lake flickering in his mind like a bomb. That weekend, he stood on the banks of Sycamore Lake, rod in hand, the ripples glinting like silver threads. Mark sat nearby, a cooler at his feet, the two men wrapped in comfortable silence. You ever think about dating again? Mark asked after an hour. Lorenzo didn't look away from the water. I'm still cleaning the wreckage. Hard to build a house on a broken foundation. Mark cracked open a beer. Yeah, but you can at least clear the lot. Doesn't mean you gotta build today. Lorenzo smirked. Is it your subtle way of saying, I need to get laid? Mark shrugged. Just saying, there's more out there than ghosts and camcorders. The first fish of the day bit a few minutes later. Lorenzo reeled it in with an almost boyish grin. It wasn't a big catch, but it tugged hard, just enough to make him feel something real. He found himself at Evergreen Books one rainy Tuesday. It wasn't planned. He'd been driving home from the gym, noticed the weather, and decided he didn't want to sit in his empty house watching reruns of Deadliest Catch Again. The store smelled of paper and wood polish. Soft jazz played overhead. Rows of untouched stories lined the walls like waiting friends. He was flipping through a paperback on the psychology of betrayal when a voice said, "That one's heavy." He looked up. A woman stood across the aisle, dark hair in a messy bun, wearing jeans and a loose gray sweater. Her eyes were striking, soft but sharp, like they'd seen both grief and grace. "It's a good read," she continued, "but it'll make you hate people for a while." Lorenzo gave a dry laugh. "Already been there." She smiled, something knowing in it. "Angie," she said, extending a hand. "I'm here almost every Tuesday. Widow Perks." He hesitated, then shook her hand. "Lorenzo, just killing time." "Well, Lorenzo, killing time. Come back on Thursdays. The cafe does fresh scones, and the mystery section has better chairs." He chuckled. "Noted." They talked for a while, mostly about books. Nothing heavy, nothing flirty, just easy. As he left, she called after him, "If you ever need a book that reminds you humans aren't trash, ask for The Art of Mending. It's hopeful without being cheesy." He didn't turn back, but he nodded. Weeks passed. Therapy continued. The gym became habit. Fishing turned into ritual. And the bookstore, well, that became something of a sanctuary. He and Angie spoke often, always by accident, always unplanned. She wasn't probing or demanding. She never asked about Matilda, and he never asked about her husband. They talked about things that didn't hurt, classic novels, old music, the frustrating joy of crossword puzzles. One Thursday, he found her sitting by the window with a coffee and 2 scones. "I guess your taste," she said, sliding one across the table. "It's cranberry walnut." He took it, surprised at how natural it felt. "Thanks for this, and for not prying." Angie shrugged. "Some people bond over shared pain. I prefer shared peace." They sat quietly, watching the rain trail down the window. Somewhere in the background, a jazz piano played. She looked over suddenly. "You don't flinch anymore when I talk." He blinked. "What?" "The first time we met, you looked like a deer in the headlights. Now you breathe. You laugh. It's nice to watch." He looked down at his coffee, warmth creeping into his chest. "It's been a long road." Angie didn't say anything for a moment. Then softly, "Keep walking. You're further than you think." At home, the walls didn't feel so cold anymore. The pictures of Matilda had all been taken down, replaced with abstract art and landscapes. His bed didn't feel like a grave. The kitchen didn't echo anymore. It was starting to feel like his house. One night, after a long day of work, Lorenzo stood in the kitchen cooking pasta and listening to a podcast. He caught himself humming. He hadn't done that in years. The sauce simmered. The garlic filled the room. He twirled noodles with a fork and plated the dish with care. He poured a glass of red wine, not to dull pain, but to enjoy it. He sat at the table and took a bite. It tasted good, not like cardboard, not like bitterness. Good. He looked out the window. The stars were out. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just was. He begins to laugh again, sleep again, eat without tasting bitterness. Chapter 8. Begging and Boundaries. It was just after 6 p.m. on a Sunday when Lorenzo heard the knock. A slow, almost hesitant rap against the front door. 3 beats, then silence. He stood from the kitchen table, where a reheated bowl of chili was beginning to cool, untouched. He hadn't been expecting anyone. Angie was out of town visiting her sister, and he hadn't told anyone to come by. A second knock, quicker this time. He walked to the door with a gnawing sense of foreboding curling in his gut. Pulling the curtain to the side, his heart thudded once hard. There they were. Matilda stood there in the fading daylight, soaked from head to toe in the light drizzle. Her hair matted, mascara streaked down her face. Jennifer stood beside her, arms crossed, red-eyed but defiant. For a moment, Lorenzo didn't move. He considered turning around and pretending he hadn't heard it. But they'd seen the curtain shift. They knew he was there. He opened the door halfway and leaned on the frame. "What?" Matilda's face twisted instantly, like a dam finally breaking. "Please," she choked. "Lorenzo, please just talk to me." Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying for hours. Her bottom lip trembled, but he could see her jaw tensing too, like she was trying to keep control and crumbling at the same time. I said everything I needed to say, Lorenzo replied evenly, voice calm but firm. Dad, Jennifer interjected, but he raised a hand, silencing her without even glancing in her direction. I made a mistake, Matilda said quickly, stepping closer, water dripping from the sleeves of her cardigan. No, that's not even the right word. I was sick, lost. It was like an addiction. I didn't even recognize myself. Lorenzo blinked. A cold wave rolled over him. You didn't recognize yourself while being passed around in a basement, he said, low and cutting. You seemed pretty into it. Her knees buckled slightly, and she gasped, a sound halfway between a sob and a whimper. I didn't know what I was doing, she pleaded. It was years ago, Lorenzo. Before therapy. Before I got better. He arched an eyebrow. Before you got better? That tape was dated 14 months ago. I was spiraling, she cried, reaching out toward him, but he stepped back. Please, you have to understand, I didn't feel seen. You were always working, always exhausted. I was lonely. I needed to feel something again. You needed 7 masked men to feel something, he spat. You needed to humiliate yourself and our family for a goddamn rush. Don't say it like that, no, he cut in sharply. You don't get to tell me how to say it. You do not control this anymore. Jennifer stepped forward. Dad, stop yelling at her. I'm not yelling, Lorenzo said, turning his cold eyes toward his daughter. This is me at my calmest. Believe me, you'd know if I was yelling. Matilda fell to her knees on the porch, the rain soaking her jeans, her palms pressing into the concrete as she looked up at him. I've been in counseling every week. I've quit drinking. I've told the pastor. I've even confessed to my sister. I've done everything I can to be better for you, for us. I'll do anything, Lorenzo. I'll wear a GPS if I have to. I'll sleep in my car. I just want to come home. There is no home, Matilda, he said quietly. There is a house where a man lived who thought his wife loved him. You burned it down in that basement. She sobbed harder, shaking, begging now without words. Just helpless, wet gasps between her tears. I'm not the woman on that tape anymore, she said. Please believe me. I saw you, Lorenzo said. Not just on the tape. In our life. In the lies. In the distance. That wasn't a different person. That was you when you didn't think you'd get caught. She looked like she'd been hit. Jennifer finally spoke, her voice cracking. You can't just throw us away. Lorenzo stared at her long and hard. Throw you away? He repeated slowly. No. You walked away. You lied to my face. Covered for her. Let me sleep beside that thing. And when I asked you, you looked me in the eyes and lied like it was nothing. I was protecting her. Jennifer yelled. From what? Lorenzo snapped. Consequences? Accountability? The truth. Jennifer's eyes welled with tears. I didn't know what else to do. You could have done the right thing, he said. You're not a child anymore, Jennifer. You're an adult. And adults own their decisions. Matilda, still on her knees, whispered, Please, Lorenzo, don't throw away 20 years. Don't throw away everything we built. He looked down at her. His heart didn't race. His hands didn't shake. He felt nothing. I didn't throw it away, he said. You did. You looked at what we had and traded it for a few hours in a basement with strangers. Matilda whimpered, then reached for his hand. He pulled it back. I'm not angry anymore, he said. I'm done. You made your choices, and I'm finally making mine. He turned to Jennifer, whose lips trembled. Please, she whispered. I'm his home. He let the silence stretch. Let her feel the weight of it. When you chose her lies over truth, he said, voice like stone, you chose your side. Chapter 9. Peace with Scars. Months had passed since the storm that tore Lorenzo's life apart. The house where his marriage had unraveled was no longer his. It had been sold quietly, the for sale sign now gone from the front lawn, replaced by new neighbors who had no idea of the battles that had been fought inside those walls. Lorenzo found himself waking in a smaller, cozier place near a quiet lake just outside town. The kind of home where mornings were wrapped in mist and evenings smelled of pine and earth. It wasn't grand or luxurious, just enough. Clean lines, a wood stove, large windows that caught the fading sunlight. A fresh start. He hadn't fully unpacked yet. Most things still sat in boxes with unopened lids, as if he wasn't ready to fully unpack his new life. Tonight was different. Angie, the woman who had steadily become a pillar in his new world, had stopped by with dinner. It wasn't an extravagant meal, just homemade stew in a ceramic bowl, warm bread, and a bottle of cheap red wine she swore was surprisingly decent. Lorenzo opened the door to her knock, the warm scent of stew rolling out into the cool air. "Angie," he said quietly, managing a smile. "You're a lifesaver." She smiled back, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "Well, I couldn't let you starve to death. Not before you get fully rehabilitated." They settled by the wood stove in his modest living room, the fire crackling low, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The warmth seeped into his bones, a balm for the cold he'd carried for too long. Between bites of stew and sips of wine, they talked about everything and nothing. Work, books they were reading, the small frustrations of day-to-day life. No talk of betrayal, no mention of the past. Just simple, healing conversation. After a long pause, Lorenzo's gaze drifted to the old postcard resting on the mantelpiece. It was the last one he had taken from the dusty suitcase he'd found months ago. The corners were dog-eared, the colors faded, but the message on the back was clear. Las Vegas, Nevada. He picked it up and turned it over in his hands. The glimmer of neon lights, the promise of gambling, late nights, and reckless abandon, all starkly ironic now. He could still hear the faint echoes of the life he'd lost, the lies, the betrayal, the secret basement. It was all a cruel mockery. Lorenzo's fingers curled around the postcard tighter. Then he stood, crossing over to the fire. The flames flickered, hungry for fuel. With a sharp motion, he tossed the postcard into the fire. The paper caught quickly, curling and blackening as the scent of burnt ink filled the room. He stood there for a moment, watching it burn, feeling something heavy begin to lift. His voice was low, barely more than a whisper, but filled with finality. "I gave her everything. She gave it to everyone." Angie watched him quietly, offering no words, only a gentle presence that felt like home. The fire popped once, sending a shower of sparks upwards, a soft crackle breaking the silence. Lorenzo closed his eyes. The rage, the pain, the heartbreak, they all still lingered beneath his skin, like scars etched deep into his soul. But he was no longer defined by them. He was reclaiming himself, piece by piece. The past was a ghost now, fading into the distance like the smoke curling up the chimney. When he opened his eyes, the room felt warmer, brighter somehow. He turned to Angie, a genuine smile finally touching his lips. For the first time in a long time, he laughed a soft, free sound that felt like hope. He realized he was beginning to live again. The firelight danced across his face, illuminating the man who was no longer a victim, but a survivor. As the night settled around them, and the quiet lake beyond reflected the moonlight, Lorenzo knew he was ready. Not just to survive, but to rise. Some men break. Others rebuild. I chose to rise.